about the theory of the consumer behavior. The principal assumption upon which the theory of consumer behavior and the demand is built is a consumer attempts to allocate his or her limited money income among available goods and services so as to maximize his or her utility. Now, the theory of consumer behavior is very helpful to understand the demand side of the market. In the market, there are two sides. One is demand side, another is supply side. Consumers are in the demand side and they demand for commodities and services in order to purchase them and to consume them and thereby to maximize their utility. Now, what is utility? Utility is the amount of satisfaction derived from the consumption of a commodity, and sometimes it is measured by some measurement units such as units. Now, there are two concepts of utility which will be discussed here. First of all, the cardinal utility theory, and second one is ordinal utility theory. According to the cardinal utility theory, utility is measurable in a cardinal sense. Cardinal utility theory assumes that we can assign values of utility, as for example, derive 100 utils from eating a slice of pizza, etc. And then according to the ordinal utility approach, utility is measurable in an ordinal sense, that in this theory, this approach does not assign values, instead works with the ranking of preferences. Now, the 19th century economists such as Jevons, Menger, Walras, Marshall assumed that utility was measurable in a cardinal sense, which means that the difference between two measurements is itself numerically significant. That means ux is equal to function of x and uy equal to function of y. Now, utility is maximized when mux by muy equal to px by py. Now, according to the cardinalist approach, total utility is equal to the overall level of satisfaction derived from consuming a good or service, and marginal utility is the additional satisfaction that an individual derives from consuming an additional unit of good or service. The formula of marginal utility is equal to change in total utility divided by change in quantity, which is equal to delta Tu by delta Q. Now, the law of diminishing marginal utility prevails in the market according to this approach. This means as more and more of a good are consumed, then the process of consumption will yield smaller and smaller amounts of additions of utility, that is marginal utility goes on decreasing. Now, when total utility is increasing, marginal utility is positive. When total utility is maximum, marginal utility is zero, and then when total utility begins to decrease or decline, the marginal utility is negative. So this is shown here in the diagram. Now, the number of units purchased is shown in the first column, then total utility is shown in the second column, and the in the third column we show the marginal utility. So when zero number of units is purchased, total utility is 0 and marginal utility is also 0. When 1 unit is purchased, total utility is 4, marginal utility is also 4. When 2 units are purchased, total utility is 7 and marginal utility is 7 minus 4 equal to 3. In this way we calculate the successive amounts of total utility and marginal utility, and these points are shown in the diagram, and joining these points we get the total utility curve and the marginal utility curve. So what is the relation between total utility and marginal utility? Total utility in general increases with Q. First of all, it increases at an increasing rate, then it increases at a decreasing rate, and then it reaches at its maximum, and then it decreases. When total utility increases at an increasing rate, the marginal utility is rising. When total utility increases at a decreasing rate, marginal utility is falling. When total utility is maximum, marginal utility is 0. And then when total utility falls, marginal utility is negative. Now, so far as we have assumed that any amount of goods can be purchased because they are always available for consumption, but in reality consumers face some constraints of limited consumers' income and also the prices of goods. So let let us assume that consumer tries to maximize his utility subject to the income constraint. There are two goods X and Y in the market and the prices Px and Py are fixed. The consumer's income is also given as I. So the consumer will try to equate the marginal utility per price for the two commodities. Marginal utility per price means additional utility derived from spending one extra unit of price for that good. That means marginal utility price is equal to mu by P. That means the consumer's motive is to equate MUX by PX and MUY by PY. So if MUX by PX is greater than MUY by PY, then purchasing X will be better for consumer. So he will purchase more and more units of commodity X and consume them. So as he goes on consuming extra units of commodity X, his marginal utilities will start falling. So MUX by PX will start falling, and this process will continue until MUX by PX becomes equal to MUI by the equilibrium. Now, there are two potential optimum positions here. So these two points are giving two amounts of utility, 223 and 252. Obviously point B is giving the consumer higher level of utility, but which point will be chosen by the consumer will depend on the expenditure of the consumer, that is income and price. So from the consumer to purchase combination A, the consumer has to spend 46 units. To purchase combination B, he has to spend 60 units. Now if his income is 46, then he will choose A, and if his income is 60, then he will choose B, because although A is affordable in this situation, but A is giving him lower level of utility, so he will not choose that. And so now we come to the ordinal approach. Economists following the lead of Hicks, Allen, Slutsky and Pareto believe that utility is measurable in an ordinal sense, that is utility derived from consuming goods such as X. Consuming a good X is a function of quantities of X and Y consumed by the consumer. That is utility, total utility is a function of X and Y. So according to the ordinal utility theory, utility can be measured in qualitative, not quantitative way. The consumer can only list the commodities according to the levels of utility, according to his preference. Here we will use two concepts, two options, indifference curves and budget line, to show the equilibrium of the consumer. The rational human beings will choose to maximize the utility by selecting highest utility. Different consumers will have different levels of utility and different concepts of equilibrium, because utility is completely a psychological concept, and also they will get different equilibrium points because they have different levels of income. So indifference curve is the curve which where the points represent a combination of items when the consumer is at indifferent situation of satisfaction. That means he will be indifferent across the points on the indifference curve. Now in the two axes we actually measure the quantities of the two goods while drawing the indifference curve. For the combination that produces higher level of satisfaction, the curves shift to the right on the first curve, and for the combination that produces a lower level of satisfaction, the curves shift to the left to IC. So these things are shown here in this diagram. Now, what are the properties of indifference curve? Indifference curve is a downward sloping curve. That means if the consumer tries to increase quantity of one commodity, you will have to decrease the another commodity. So indifference curve is convex to the origin. That means marginal rate of substitution between X and Y will be decreasing as the consumer will move from left to the right. Indifference curves will not intersect each other, and different indifference curves will show different levels of satisfaction. Now, if the two indifference curves would intersect each other, then the transitivity assumption would be violated, because here in the if the two indifference curves say have intersected each other at point A, so A is indifferent to B in IC1, and also A is indifferent to C in IC2. So from the transitivity assumption, B will be indifferent to C, but that is not possible here. It is clearly evident that point C would be preferred to point C, because at point C the consumer is getting more amounts of both the goods X and Y. So therefore this assumption is false, and two indifference curves can never intersect or touch each other. Now what is budget line? Budget line shows that all combinations of the items can be purchased for a particular level of income. Here the equation of the budget line will be equal to Px Qx plus Py Qy, and the slope of the budget line will be Px by Py, which is a negative slope, so minus Px by Py. In the x-axis, if the quantity of y is equal to 0, then all income will be used to purchase x. So m equal to Px Qx, or Qx equal to m by Px. So that is the similarly at the y-axis, when quantity of x is equal to 0, then all income will be used to purchase y. So m equal to Py Qy, or Qy equal to m by Py. M by Py is nothing but the intercept of the budget line, and slope of the budget line will be m by Py divided by m by Px, which is equal to Px by Py. So as a result of that, if price increases, price of x increases, the budget line will shift rightwards, and when price decreases, the budget line will shift leftwards. And on the other hand, when price of y increases, the budget line will shift downwards, and when Py declines, the budget line will shift upwards. So on the other hand, if income increases, the budget line will shift parallelly upwards, and if income decreases, budget line will shift parallelly downwards. And the equilibrium point of the consumer is shown here, which is the tangency point between the indifference curve and the budget line, because all these 3 points, C, E and D, are affordable for the consumer, but E is giving the maximum amount of utility the consumer can get from this income, since IC1 is not affordable for the consumer. So therefore the tangency point between the indifference curve IC2 and the budget line MM1 will be the equilibrium point, which is represented as the point E in the diagram. So actually shows that as price declines, quantity consumed increases, and these combinations of prices and quantities can be plotted here in a separate diagram, and joining all these combinations, we are getting a downward sloping curve, which is called the demand curve of the consumer. So demand curve of the consumer can be derived from the price curve. And the another curve is income consumption curve. If income increases and prices are fixed, then the budget line shifts to the right parallelly, and by shifting the equilibrium point higher. So for different levels of income, we get different equilibrium points. Joining all such equilibrium points, we can get the income consumption curve, which shows the points for the combinations of goods that can be purchased when income changes and price is fixed. So this is the income consumption curve. For 3 levels of income, M1, M2, M3, we can get 3 tangency points between the successive budget lines and the successive indifference curves, and joining all these points, we can get the curve which is called ICC, that is income consumption curve. So in the conclusion, we can say that we have discussed 2 types of utility theory here, cardinal utility theory and ordinal utility theory. We can get the relation between total utility and marginal utility from the cardinal utility approach, and we got indifference curve and budget line from the ordinal utility approach. Now equilibrium and utility maximization can be achieved either through cardinal theory or through ordinal theory, and we got also 2 curves through connection of equilibrium points. By changes in price, we got price consumption curve, and from changes in income, we got income consumption curve.